Welcome to Break Through the Ordinary podcast. You know you desire a more impactful, connected, and extraordinary life. That is why we are here to bring you stories from transformational leaders, healers, and entrepreneurs who find themselves trapped in the ordinary and are now living the most extraordinary life because of a breakthrough moment. Together, we will provide first-class tips and tools enabling you to purposefully live, aligning your heart and soul, because we believe no one should be trapped, imprisoned by their past. We are your hosts, Mark and Claudine Chamante, a sibling duo who once struggled to survive lonely, ordinary lives until we began to use revolutionary healing tools and created a thriving, abundant, meaningful life we are now proud of. Today, on this episode of Break Through the Ordinary, our guest is Aaron Kleinerman.
And Aaron is a transformational tantric coach, facilitator, and speaker who enlightens his clients to step boldly outside their comfort zone and into their greatness. He is also the author of a best-selling book, The Embodied Man. And we are happy to have you. Just so you know, we first experienced you at a festival, and we felt you were a man who was really embodied, true, authentic, someone we admired, and really wanted to share with the world.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I love what you're creating.
Thank you. Thank you. So one of the questions we ask all our guests in the beginning is if you could share a major breakthrough that you've had in your life that shifted you from an ordinary to an extraordinary life. Like, how did you do it? What was it for you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind was a moment actually when I was 14 years old, and I was taking a 3-hour drive with my dad from south of Boston, where I grew up to New Hampshire, where my sister was at college. And in this drive, I essentially counseled him out of his gambling addiction. Some gambling was something in his life that had always really taken a lot of money away. It was an issue, it was an addiction, and I was just a young 14-year-old boy just observing my father that had a love and appreciation for him. And yet I noticed something wanted to change and shift. So I just really spoke to him from my heart. I communicated what I felt, what I was observing. And he listened. He had a willingness. And it really changed the trajectory of my relationship with him from really, of course, he was still my father and I learned a lot from him, but we deepened in our friendship and our connection. And, in many ways, I kind of have supported him a lot through the years. But for a young man, it was like, I realized there was an innate capacity inside of me that could be channeled into supporting others to move through challenges in their life.
Wow, that's a young age to embrace that gift.
Yeah, that gift is right.
And continue to impact the world with that gift too. Oh my gosh. And are you and your dad still in that same relationship that's father-son but counsel?
Yeah, it definitely caused some resentment for me later in my life when I was at times I just want him to be a father that I can lean on. And in many ways I could, there were conversations that I could have with him around, women and drugs and alcohol at a young age that a lot of other friends couldn't have because we had that very open, fluid dynamic. And I'm very grateful, and there were definitely times where I was like, I want him to be different. But to this day, we have a beautiful, loving friendship. I actually just sent him recently a copy of my book and, just shared a lot of gratitude and appreciation. And, there's a lot of love and it taught me a lot around the space of learning to love and respect what is and not the illusion of what I wanted things to be. And that was a big takeaway from that situation because I was comparing my life to a lot of the other young teenage boys that had fathers that, were buying them cars and doing this and that. And my dad was living out of his car and, could barely even support a lot of things in the family. And I was so frustrated by that for a long time as a young man, but it really shifted to a place of saying thank you, and I talked about this a lot in the chapter on gratitude in my book, because I think life presents opportunities for us to appreciate what is and not try to fight what isn't. And I was appreciating what is, and I still have a vast appreciation for my relationship and friendship with him.
I want to say this is what I admire about you and even in your book. It's that you find the gratitude, you find the beauty, but you don't disregard that there's work to do. There's pain points. There's pieces of, just like you start your book off with looking at mother, looking at father, because I feel like what you present, and it's what I believe, is you have to go through it to get to the other side where you truly find the gratitude, not to disregard the pain, the frustration, and stuff like that. I also want to just say, this is your book. Everybody should get it. It's amazing. I haven't finished it yet because I just got it not too long ago. But it embodies that, the beauty of the gift, but you have to go through the work. And I admire that and appreciate it about that. And I wanted to say, if you could share some tips, tools, or things for men to start to embody that life and that love that you talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for the appreciation. My journey and kind of what I take people on in that journey, especially for men, is like sometimes we want to just say, "Oh, I'm grateful. Everything's fine. It's just a happy dandy day, and everything's so good." But then there's still these cells in our body that are holding on to the pain and the discomfort. So really, the point of starting, at least for me, and really one of the places I encourage, is beginning to get the mind right. My journey into this world of coaching and teaching was spending a lot of years like dissecting and learning, how do I balance and equilibrate my thoughts, perceptions, and beliefs around the world around me. And so somebody who's listening, beginning to look at, well, if life is for me and not against me, how can I see the dynamic balance that's happening? So if you're listening, you're like, oh, there's something that bad, quote unquote, happened in the past. How can I learn to see what were the advantages of this? How did this serve me? And if there's something you're holding on to as only beneficial, it's like, what were the drawbacks? Because to get into the body means that I have to learn how to master how my mind is working. So, the mind is really the gateway into the body, but eventually the mind falls away when it starts to be neutralized in its perspective, when it starts to be more equanimous in its nature of how it's observing the world. So really the gateway for me, and I think for a lot of men especially, is that we tend to be very cognitive, understanding, logic-driven beings. So, okay, we are that way. So let's learn how to utilize our mind most effectively to see that there's always going to be good and bad and kind and cruel and naughty and nice. That's just part of this world of duality in which we live in. So we can't transcend duality to, it's all love, until we master duality, really.
Good perspective. I like that perspective. Be here to move through. Okay.
Yeah. And that, I'm going to use the word dance because I feel like when we're in relationship, so if you could speak to that way that men are, more geared in their duality, how does that show up when they're in relation with the feminine principles?
Well, the first point to that I think is actually very important is that the masculine also knows the feminine inside. One of the chapters in the book, I talk about awakening the inner queen. And, most men picking up a book on mastering masculinity would be like, what do you mean? There's no queen inside here. But ultimately, until that male body knows the feminine inside, then there's often a lot of resentment and frustration and annoyance with the feminine on the outside. So I like to say, until I loved, honored, and appreciated the crazy bitch inside of me, then I couldn't really appreciate her on the outside. And then she was coming in stronger and more intense. And, So really, for the male body to know thyself more deeply means that he knows the masculine principle and the feminine principle inside of him, again, so that he knows duality. And that in that knowing of duality, you can move beyond duality. But you have to recognize that I'm in a male body, but there's also a feminine essence inside of me. Now, that doesn't mean I'm just going to start like being in my everythingness and go into my feminine flow and just forget that I have balls, because I do still have balls. But I want to also know that I have receptivity, I have creativity, I have intuition, I have more of that. And when I know more of that, then I can appreciate how it shows up inside of others, especially inside of relationships.
I thoroughly embrace that and believe that philosophy. It's about seeing the feminine inside. As men, we're taught to be so afraid of it and close it and just shut it off like it doesn't exist. It fascinates me because it is really going into that softness, the vulnerability. I mean, I'm in a men's group too, and we really deal with that and open up to that place. How do you teach that? Like, we're in this world and men are shut down and we're strong and we're, this is how we do it. We don't open to that. Da, da, da. So how do you open somebody who's in that space? It's easy when you're talking maybe to a guy like me. I'm like open to it. Yeah, I agree. But how do you deal with that when it's coming from that place?
Yeah, I mean, really, the question you asked there is one of the strongest intentions in getting this book out into the world, is that I feel like it's the opening door to a deeper place of willingness. Because, I look at my own life, and one of the greatest places that I've learned was when I fell flat on my face, especially inside of relationship. And so I find, especially for stubborn male bodies that don't necessarily always want to change, usually they have to fall apart before they're like, maybe something new needs to happen here. And that's challenging, and that can be difficult at times. So the way I see that change exist is that first there has to be a seed of willingness inside of the male body. And that seed of willingness might come from relationship, it might come from purpose, it might come from some part inside of him that recognizes the way in which I'm doing life isn't working anymore. The way in which I'm showing up in the world, something doesn't feel right inside. And then when that seed of willingness happens, they either pick up a book, or they end up in a workshop, or they have a conversation with somebody. I'm not one of these teachers that thinks everyone needs to go to retreats and workshops. It's like, what I think is necessary is just for a little bit of an openness to realize, whoa, I can start to change the perception to which I'm living and walking through life. And this has been a huge part of my journey. I mean, I come, even after, I had that experience at 14, I ended up going to a maritime military world where, like, the thought of somebody having an inner feminine would be like, what are you, a pansy boy? Like, what's wrong with you, So I can relate and speak to that ideology, that framework, that value system of men. And in that, I think when men feel like they're being heard and listened to, as often what happens inside of men's group, then it's like, there's a permission field that opens for something new to happen. But I'll tell you what doesn't work, and this is especially geared towards the female bodies listening, who are like, I need you to change, and you're not doing the work, and what's wrong with you? And this is sometimes I see what happens when, women who tend to be more open to the world of transformation and goddess groups and doing all this thing, and then they're like, my man's not doing anything, and why isn't he doing anything? And I want him to change. And like, you hear this kind of, framework happen. So what supports that man is loving acceptance. It's just saying, okay, I'm lovingly accepting you. And then in that, he can start to feel like, I'm accepted here. And I realize that in that acceptance, I personally want something to change differently, and I'm not being forced to try to change.
I just want to say, and that's an intense space to occupy for the feminine, for the women, to really come from a place of acceptance and love that creates that space in a man that goes, ooh, I don't feel her pressure. I don't feel her judgment on me. That's a real intense place. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what you had said earlier, Aaron, is right. This is also doing our work with our mother and father wounds. And I'm not even going to call them wounds. It's relationship, the patterns and the conditions that we then project onto our beloveds. As if I need you to be so that I can be okay. I don't want to feel this. I want you to be some way so I don't have to feel this. But you had said when you were even talking about your father, there's this place, and I think it's in any relationship, is the letting go of the illusion so that we can be in what is. And maybe we could speak into that a little bit more. And it could be any relationship, but we could talk about embodied love, because to me, embodied love is between friends, family members, siblings, right? And romantic love. Could you speak into that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this connects dots in a lot of places, because as humans, I think we often have a projected reality of the way we wish things to be. And we kind of create this white picket fence fantasy of, my father's supposed to be like this and my partner's supposed to be like this. And then when they don't show up that way, we're like, they're not doing as I wanted to, and this isn't fair, and all the other things that start to come up. So, the letting go of the illusion for me at a very young age with how I thought a father was supposed to be, let me actually appreciate the way he was, which wasn't a man that made a lot of money and took care of, I could lean on him in certain ways, but he I saw the advantages of I could have more open conversations. There was a different communication that was there. And I see this happen in relationship a lot as people fall in love with the fantasy of what can be. There's this like, you have so much potential, and I'm going to fall in love with that potential, and I'm not actually going to appreciate what is. So if you're listening now and you're in a relationship and you find yourself in love with the potential of who your partner can be, there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's creating an emotional turmoil inside of you and a frustration for how they are, then that is something to more deeply look at. And, I especially find in the place of deep relating, there's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide, there's nothing that we can do to try to hide our deepest wounds and fear of failure and all the illusions that are present. So what if we could actually strip away all those masks and just be seen for how we are, where we are, and the beauty that's present? And that takes work, and it takes commitment, and it also takes a big part of those Hollywood Disney fantasies to kind of die. It's a necessity for them to die so that something new can be birthed. And in that new birthing, the world is an oyster of possibility and a creative influx of different places that we can go when we're actually living more inside of, as you said before, that embodied love of appreciation, of compassion, of understanding that just lives and breathes inside of the life that we're living.
Do you work with couples at all? Because I mean, for me as both a therapist and a coach, I do think that there are couples who are willing to come together, and you use the word grieve, because I think there is a continual grief and letting go of the illusion or the hopes or what we projected it to be. And how do you, if you do work with couples, how do you help them navigate that letting go and accepting who's in front of you without the mask?
Well, one of the big pieces of that, and yes, I do a lot of work with couples, especially the last probably 3-4 years, is a deep grieving of what was. Because what happens when couples are together for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years is sometimes they're still frustrated with something that happened 15 years ago. And that frustration, and I'll speak into a very science-oriented framework of why that frustration is still existing, is because that frustration is still a half spin of quantum energy that's stuck inside the system that hasn't been neutralized. So literally, they're still being frustrated. So the partner is still showing up in a similar dynamic relating place to what is sparking that trigger that reminds them of the situation in the past, because they haven't learned to love, honor, and appreciate the perfection of the past. So that partner is there as the greatest spiritual tool for their inner growth. But instead of them looking at it that way, they're still blaming, shaming, condemning, and being a victim of circumstance. So couples relating, I think, is the greatest spiritual practice that we can have if we choose to have the context of that framework. And that's really a choice that's present, because the grieving and the letting go is a burning away of all of the stuff that has been happened along the past. And I've seen this. I actually just got a message from a client I worked with years ago just the other day, and he's like, I've gone through all of these ebbs and flows, and my wife, we had a full grieving and a letting go of their relationship. And then they had about 6 months or 9 months apart, and then they came back together, and it was like they were coming back together with this newness, this freshness, and not a holding on to all the things that had happened, because they gave themselves permission to really let go of all the patterns in the past. I'm not saying that has to be the way for couples, but that to me was an example, because now they're in this thriving, beautiful relationship because they're meeting each other where they are, not where they were.
So I have a question around this, because I really come from a belief of alignment, that you have, in relationship, there has to be an alignment, or inside of you have to be aligned with. So where does that play into all of this? Because you could want to work it out with somebody, but if you're not aligned, will that really work? Or Can you help me with that? Because that's a place I come with. Like, I need to be aligned in me when I'm going into that and aligned with the person, or what am I doing there? Am I just playing out old patterns, or can you speak to that?
Yeah, of course. And I love that you bring in the word alignment, because I feel like we can come together in relationship and learn and grow and deepen in the place of love, but that doesn't mean it needs to last for a fairy tale lifetime. And so if souls aren't still deeply aligned together in that way, then there has to be a willingness to say, hey, I love you, but maybe it's time that we let each other go. But what's required in doing that is each person in that relationship, they know their own inner union, meaning they know their own masculine and feminine in the primary relationship. My primary relationship, whether I'm in a monogamous, primary partnership on the outside, my primary relationship is my inner union. And so the alignment comes from both my masculine and feminine consciously choosing the masculine and feminine in the partner that I'm with. And that alignment might not always be there. There might be that initial, erotic, alive state where you can't get enough of each other and you keep on ripping off each other's clothes. But then after maybe 6 months or a year or a couple of years, the honeymoon period dies. And you might realize that when it comes to heart, when it comes to mind, when it comes to emotion, when it comes to purpose, that the alignment of the souls might not be in the exact trajectory. And the shadow side of this I see sometimes is people, when they realize relationships are here for growth, there's this other thing that comes in where they're like, I'm not going to leave this relationship because I'm still growing and I'm still going to keep burning and I'm going to keep burning away and all of the things that are happening. And yes, this is beautiful, but if you're not compatible, then it's just good to call a spade and not try to make it something it's not.
So even in the alignment, using the languaging, which we both are in agreement with, Mark, I sometimes see couples, their growth goes like this. They grow together. It's not that they grow apart, but there's a journey that each of them have. I mean, do you see that too? Where it's not that they're separate, but there's work and growth that they each give each other the space to then come and wind together? Or do you feel like once someone goes somewhere to do their work, it's like, oh no?
Yeah, I think there's definitely ebbs and flows. I mean, I've looked at, in the long-term partnerships I've been in, there's times when we come together and we're just this like insatiable connection, and then other times we kind of grow apart. And it's noticing in that growing apart, is it growing apart because there's a deepening in each individual's inner union? Or is there a growing apart because the alignment isn't necessarily there for your bodies to keep being together? One of the biggest issues I see that happens inside of couples is that often people are afraid of leaving because they're afraid of losing love. And they're afraid that if I step away from this relationship, love to all of the projected reality that they put upon that individual is suddenly now not going to be there anymore. And it's like, oh my God, what do I do if love isn't there? And a lot starts to rise up inside. And that's where it's like a looking at, can I know the love that I seek on the outside? Can I know it here on the inside? Can I know it deeply and completely? Because then in that place where there might be a coming apart, or maybe one partner is playing a bit more of the love addict, chasing love, or one partner is being the love avoider, falling away from love, then they can see this dynamic dance that's happening, and they can have more of an appreciation for the polarities that are at place. And in that appreciation, they're both getting to know each other more, and they can actually, day after day, week after week, choose love in a beautiful way, and they're not choosing to just be there because they're afraid of losing love.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's a big one. I see that everywhere. I've seen it myself. I've seen the idea of, the panic of losing love or not having it out there or whatever. And really it keep going back inside, that the love is like, until it's secure here, it's always going to chase something outside for fulfillment and love and security. And I love what you bring. I love
Great conversation. Do you have practices that you could share, I have not read the book, Mark got it first, is that you do to really nurture your inner union? Because I'd love that. I've never heard that put that way. And for me, I have a magnificent masculine energy. I have a feminine energy, but my masculine has really worked well in my career. I've had extraordinary success. So I'm having a new union and deepening relationship with my feminine embodiment at this time through, working with an intimacy coach. So is there some practices you could share with our listeners about how to nurture either side, this inner union?
Yeah, one of the things on an embodied level, and there's a practice in the book called everythingness and nothingness. And, it's more of a meditative inner practice in the morning. And, oftentimes when people start meditating, it's a lot of sitting in silence and sitting in stillness. And that's a beautiful, deepening of masculine energy to witness without judgment, to appreciate what is, to be this pillar of presence. What often isn't cultivated a lot of is cultivating the meditative movement of the body. And now that could be dance, that could be movement, that could be putting a pillow down in front of you and beating it, to a pulp. That could be letting all of the anger, the sadness, the expression, the everythingness inside. And so the foundation of the practice is that this masculine pillar, and if you look at it in a tantric reference point, Shiva is kind of on the mountain. Shiva is this masculine principle of stillness, of power, of penetrative presence. And then Shakti is a spinning circular energy that's all around him, in the wind, and the tides, and the currents, and the changing, and the swirling, everything. And any man listening, I'm sure, has come across Shakti in all of her forms. And she's beautiful and radiant, and we love her. We love to adore her, and touch her, and caress her. And then sometimes we're afraid of her. And what is she going to do? And what happens? So the practice, and you can do this in the morning, is 5 minutes of nothingness being, and it's actually better to do it the other way around. Do 5 minutes of everythingness, where you put on a timer on your phone, and you just put on dance, and you put on music, and you just move, and you sway, or you beat a pillow, or you just let all of the stuff. It might be weird, it might be silly, it might be strange. Your mind might be like, what am I doing? This isn't stillness. I'm losing my mind, whatever is going on. At the end of that, the timer goes off, and then you just come into stillness. You come into presence. So that practice can be done 5 and 5, 10 and 10, 20 and 20, whatever it is. But what you're doing is, on an embodied level, you're training your body to be in stillness, and you're training your body to be inside of everythingness. And so for male bodies, what that will do is, often what we don't know the more of is the everythingness. So that way, when we see the everythingness happen on the outside, we've already had our practice in that morning. You're like, I know that one. I was just doing that one earlier. And there's less of a, oh my God, I need to change. The Shakti is going crazy. And what do I need to do to change her? And then vice versa. For the female body that sometimes, might know more of the everythingness, or, whichever the related is, when an opportunity arises for you to just witness without judgment and just be appreciative of what is, you've already been training your body day after day to be inside of that vibration. So that practice, to me, the first time I did it for a 32-day practice, and it was like, it shifted how I was observing the world around me, because I started to see rigidity in form as well as the swirling waters within us. And this is really just mastering more of this dualistic nature of our human body.
Thank you. That is a very new practice. I've never heard the secondary one. So I love that, in the everything.
I'm always doing the meditation. I'm going to do the movement now, and add that sound and whatever it is, pillow in the morning or whatever it is. That
in the book, I can't remember what chapter, but there's that practice. I outline it quite specifically, so people can go there for a reference point.
Yeah, thank you.
Nowadays, you're teaching everywhere, and are you teaching just one way for men? Or are you teaching couples? Are you teaching everything around the world? And what does that look like? And
Yeah, I'm teaching a lot. I'm in Portugal at the moment. I'm heading back to Bali the end of this week. I have a few groups and I have a men's retreat. So one of the big retreats I run is called the Initiation Journey for Men, which is a 7-day like deep dive. It's a feminine initiation for men as well as an initiation into the dark masculine. So I'm playing with these two polarities. One is this very tender, afraid, like little girl energy that's in a male body that hasn't expressed her needs, that doesn't know how to be seen, that doesn't know how to be heard. And the other one is on the other side of that is a dark masculine penetrative power, which often has been had his balls cut off and hasn't really learned to be assertive and direct and clear. So these polarities are really most separated inside the male body. So that's a lot of what I work with the initiation journey. I have one coming up in Bali in a couple of weeks, and then Costa Rica in May, and then Spain in June. And then I do a lot of work with couples one-on-one. So I have a lot of clients that I kind of do Zoom sessions with. I teach for a couple different organizations. So with my last partner, she started the Embodied Awakening Academy. So I teach some workshops and retreats and stuff with them, one of the teachers inside the academy. And then there's another group called ISTA, which I teach some retreats with. I have like 3 or 4 retreats I'm teaching in different countries all over the world. So between that and then festivals and my own personal time as well. I'm a man that moves around a lot, but I love it. I love sharing this work with the world, and especially with this book coming out, there's just a lot more, opportunities and things that are arising to share this work into people's lives, into their hearts.
Appreciate you and appreciate that you're bringing that.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to have to talk to you more offline. There's some things.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, I have to say, I walked out of your first workshop at the festival, and I saw Mark, and I said, I just met a man that had the cleanest energy I've been near. And I really honor how you showed up that day. And I think I had the opportunity to see you in 2 different workshops. And I'm sitting here going, what's your why? What is that drives you in this place?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's a few pieces of it. For one, my why, it's a why in the writing of the book. It's the why in my moving around is to support humans to have a deeper mastery of this experience so that the wisdom that they've been birthed with into this world can be expressed. I think our current world trajectory showcases a lot of people asleep at the wheel, following orders, following suit, and there's an awakening happening. And what one of my whys is to be a supportive seed that can put some water on that awakening inside the seeds of the souls inside of many people on this planet. And the other piece to that why is I work in the realms of Tantra, and Tantra isn't all around sexuality, but it also includes sexuality. So the most powerful life force energy that we know on this planet is our sexual energy. It's what's brought us to be able to have this conversation right now. And often in the world of self-development and transformational work, sometimes sexuality is pushed aside. So I love to just completely take all the masks off, completely, just get real with the shadows and the things that we often have the deepest issues with around sex, money, and power. And when we can confront those 3 places in a healthy, effective way that's not leaky, that's not gray, that's not like, getting into, we're getting into uncomfortable places, but we're doing it from a place of inner impeccability, inner strength, inner capacity to be in our sovereignty, as well as to learn how to make choices that are aligned to the wisdom of why we have incarnated in the first place.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I feel like we could talk forever.
For sure, I can.
I'm sure. As we're ending, do you have any last words of wisdom, or you want to depart on our audience that leave us with?
What I would say is that you have a choice, and the next book I'm going to be writing probably in the next year or 2 is kind of more about this. And this choice is something that's alive inside of every moment. We have a choice of, am I making decisions from, the unequilibrated, frustrated part of my mind, or am I making a choice from the knowledge and the neural pathways that have been opened up my heart? And that place, only you who's listening knows that. Are you making choices trying to be something that you're not? Or are you living into the unique natural expression of your greatness that's here to be expressed on this planet? You know, there's a group I'm a part of, a big retreat I'm leading later in the year in Peru. It's all about awakening giants. And there's a giant inside of you. There's a giant that is seeking to express herself, himself on this planet. And the more that you can clear away the shame, the resentment, the fear, the trauma, the stuff in the past, then that unique essence, just like, you know, a seed that falls from a big oak tree, that seed has a unique entelechy, has a unique intelligence that wants to have the water to express its beautiful, strong roots in this world. And every single human, every single person who's listening right now has that unique knowingness, that unique intelligence. There may have been stories and issues and stuff that's been coagulated along the way. So learn the tools present to clear away some of the stuff from the past so that you step into the world with clarity, with a deeper mastery, so that the wisdom inside of your soul gets to be seen and heard and felt by the world around you.
Thank you, Aaron. I thank you for making the time internationally to be here with the different time zones and to share your wisdom. And I look forward for the opportunities. I'm signed up on your website to see where you are and what aligns in my schedule. So
I want to do every workshop. Remember this book? Guys, get this. Women, get this. It's amazing. You're an amazing human being. Yep. Look forward to seeing you again and sharing more.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.